Hello, welcome back. It's Tuesday afternoon. Yesterday I went for a long walk. Yesterday I went to see The Long Walk in the cinema. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. Yes, I know I am doing a video about a new film which has just been released. And I've been saying for months that I'm not going to do that anymore because these videos don't really get many views, which is one of the reasons I created the Films of the Month series, where I just talk about films I've seen during the month, whether it's at the cinema, streaming, download, or whatever. But I want to do a video, not a long one, about The Long Walk because I think it's probably quite an important and very timely film. And it's one which will definitely be in my top 10 films of the year. Not because I enjoyed it, but because it is so powerful and so gut-wrenching. And yeah, it's very, very harrowing. You will probably have seen other reviews of this film online. You've probably read lots of other reviews. And you will know that it's based on a short story or novella by Stephen King, writing under his Richard Bachman alias. This is directed by Francis Lawrence. It's a story which is really extremely contemporary, and it's a story that says a lot about the way the world is today and the way America is today. It's a story which is set in a dystopian future, which really isn't so far removed from the dystopian present day. It's torn from tomorrow's headlines, but it's torn from next week's headlines in a way. It's not a particularly starry film. It has a couple of names that we know, but it's led by a young actor called Cooper Hoffman, alongside David Johnson, who I think first came to my attention in Alien Romulus last year, and with a very striking performance by Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself, in a very different and gritty, brutal role. The film is set in a dystopian future where supposed to be a couple of decades after a civil war has caused massive unrest and massive social collapse in America. The country is now a totalitarian regime. The country is trying to pick itself up. It's trying to get industry up and running again. It's trying to get its workforce moving. And one of the ways it does that is by holding an annual long walk. Every young man or teenage boy is encouraged to apply to enter this walk via a countrywide lottery, and 50 lucky contestants are chosen to participate in this walk. And the person who wins the walk, or is the effectively last man standing in the walk, will win untold riches. They'll win their heart's desire. They can change their lives and the lives of those around them. The film starts with our lead character, Raymond Ray Garrity, played by a young actor called Connor Hoffman. I've not seen him before, but my God, he reminded me of a young Rory Kinnear. Everything about his face and his facial movements and his actions just struck me as a very young Rory Kinnear. He's Ray, and at the beginning of the film, his mother, played by Judy Greer, who is the only female-speaking character in the entire film, she's taking him to the starting line of the latest Long Walk, where 50 young lads have been chosen and selected to go on the walk. She doesn't want him to go. She wants him to pull out, but he's determined he wants to do this for reasons that we find out later on in the film. He's deposited at the starting line and he meets some of the other boys, particularly a character called Pete, played by David Johnson. And they form a bit of a bond, they become friends, and in a very nicely put together sequence, we meet some of the other boys that we're going to spend time with during the film, and we get thumbnail ideas of who they are and their personalities and so on. They're getting ready and they're limbering up for this walk. They don't know how long it's going to last. It literally is last man standing. Then the major rolls up in an armoured vehicle. He's played by Mark Hamill, very gruff, tough, no-nonsense military type. And he, for the benefit of us and the contestants, explains the rules of the walk. They have to walk constantly. They have to keep moving. They can't drop under 3 miles an hour. They get warnings if they do stop or pause. If they have 3 warnings, they get their ticket, and their ticket is a bullet in the head. So effectively, we've got 50 young contestants in this walk, and they all know that all but one of them are going to die quite brutally. And that's how the film sets out its stall. The boys set off on the walk, And at first, it's sort of quite good-natured. The weather's good. They're yomping away, and they're quite happy. They're bantering. They're taking the mickey out of one another. They're irritating one another. And then the first boy falls, and we suddenly realise, and they suddenly realise what the stakes are here. It sort of comes home to them that, wow, they're all going to die except one. But there's no particular rivalry. I mean, we only meet a handful of the boys. There's 50 of them. We meet a few of them. We get to know a few of them. The rest are sort of background characters. One or two of them come forward. But mainly it's a sort of bulk of young men striding through the countryside. And it is a devastated sort of countryside because there's been this war, there's been this unrest. And the countryside, whilst it's the wide open spaces, it's not particularly beautiful. The people that they pass are dishevelled. There are dead animals on the verge of the road, burning cars, people watching them. Because the whole thing is being televised. It's like the ultimate reality show. We don't see any of that. We don't go behind the camera. We don't do anything except follow these boys on their walk. There are one or two flashbacks which sort of flesh out the position that Ray is in and why he's found him in this position. So everything else going on in the world, we're oblivious to. And I think the boys become aware of the gravity of what they're doing in the evening when they have to go uphill, a particularly vertiginous hill. And this is where it all becomes a bit Squid Game, because a number of the boys there stumble, they fall, they can't get up again. And there are these quite chilling scenes of these soldiers jumping out of these armoured vehicles and just shoot them in the head. And these bodies just lying there. And their numbers are reduced quite drastically in that first night. And as the film wears on, we see that they do more and more miles, 20 miles, 30 miles, 100 miles. The boys are getting more and more exhausted. They're sleeping on their feet. They are relieving themselves on the road. And there's no let up from it. There's no let up from the pace. They have to keep moving. Ray and Pete particularly form a very close bond, and they support one another. At the back of their mind, of course, they know what the end of this is going to be. That only one of them can get through. And from the other characters, some of the characters don't get on. There are bullies. There are people who are comedians of the group. But as time wears on, that fades away, and it just becomes a question of these people just carrying on moving through terrible weather, terrible landscapes. They just have to keep moving. Their shoes start falling apart. Their muscles tighten. They start to stumble. There's one particularly horrible scene that happens to one of the boys. In fact, it's all pretty horrible because it's all done in sort of graphic close-up. When the boys are shot, we see them shot. We see, we saw the gore and miasma. So it's very brutal and very hard. And what starts off for the boys, and in a way for us, is a bit of a jape with these lads walking and walking and walking, quickly becomes much darker and much harder and much more harrowing and much more disturbing. This is a brilliant film. It's really brilliantly put together, and it's a very dialogue-heavy film. It's not an action film in any way, and it's nice actually to see a film that focuses on people talking and the naturalistic communications that these boys have. They form bonds and they try and keep each other going, even though they all know that at the end they want to win this walk. They want everybody else to die so that they can win. But that dynamic changes a bit as they become closer and as they become more reliant on one another. And it's a tough watch. I will just say it's a tough watch. So I wanted to talk about it because I think it is an important film in today's world, because I was watching this, it was just throwing back into my face so much of what we see in the world at the moment, the divisions and the dissent and the anger and the blind fury and the entitlement and the avarice. All these things that humanity has become are reflected in this film. This is a film set in a dystopian future, which, as I said at the beginning, doesn't feel that far away. You can sort of see this sort of thing happening. The idea of the long walk is that it encourages people, it encourages young people to get up and do something and achieve. I don't know that it would encourage people to go on the long walk because they all know what's in store for them when they do it. But the idea is that it encourages people to motivate themselves so they don't have to go on the long walk, so that they can get industry working again, get the country working. It seems extreme, but in all honesty, it doesn't seem as extreme as some of the stuff that we hear pouring out of the White House these days, day after day. And it's the sort of thing that you can imagine happening, And it's an extreme, of course, it's an extreme situation, it's an extreme predicament, and it's ghastly, and it's horrible, and it's ugly and cold and grey. It's not a glamorous film, but it is brilliantly made, it's brilliantly written. The script is very sharp and very good. It really makes you invest in these characters, particularly Ray and Pete, who do become great friends through this terrible adversity that they've volunteered for. It's an extraordinary film, and I wanted to talk about it out of just mentioning it as part of Films of the Month because I think it's an important film, but it isn't a fun film to watch. It is tough. I mean, I know I watched this in a fairly full cinema on a Monday morning, quite surprisingly. And when it started, you had the usual chatter of people talking a bit too loudly during the trailers and the rustling of bags and things. And when the film got into its stride, if you pardon the pun, you could hear a pin drop. It was a deathly silence. And when people left, they sort of filed out. And it is that sort of film that sort of mutes your reaction when you've seen it. I don't think anybody leaves this film with a spring in their step because it really is not that sort of film. It's a terrific film. I think it's an important film. It's not just another horror film. It's got something to say about the ruthlessness and brutality of the 21st century. And it just seemed to me as something that was a pointer to where we could be going if we're not very, very careful. It's a great film. If you're of a nervous disposition, or if you do find things like this disturbing and upsetting, you won't want to see this. Great as it is as a film, and it's a great accomplishment, but it's a tough watch. As I said, nobody's going to come out of this with a smile on their face and say, well, I had a really good time with that. I admired it as a film and I enjoyed it and enjoyed watching it, but it wasn't a good time, but it's a great film. So if you are tempted to see this, it's down to what you can cope with at the end of the day. If you can cope with something which is not sweetness and light and isn't action, and I think it's an antidote and a counter-argument to those people who say, oh, cinema's shallow these days. It's all music and dancing and superheroes and flashiness and emptiness. This shows that it is not like that at all. In fact, a lot of the horror films we've had this year are not that sort of film at all. And they have actually been this year, I think some of the best films of this year have been those unusual horror films. And I think this is horrific and it's terrifying. It's very hard to watch in places. Whilst it's not a horror film per se, I think it drifts into that category. But it's a very clever, very well put together film. But it isn't an easy watch. So I would say approach with caution. If you're made of stern stuff and if you can handle something which isn't fun and isn't lightweight and isn't throwaway and isn't a film you're going to forget, because I'm not going to forget this film, that's for sure. I don't want to see it again in a hurry, but if you can handle that sort of material, adult material, dealing with difficult topics and difficult subjects and postulating ideas that are difficult and uncomfortable, but putting them in a world that we recognise, then I think you will get a lot out of this film. I thought this was a superb film for all these reasons, and I'm going to give it 9 out of 10. The Long Walk is in cinemas now. But as I said, approach with caution. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video more than I enjoyed The Long Walk. If you have liked the video and you're new here, why not like and subscribe to the channel? Don't do a lot of current film reviews because, as I said in the past, they don't get much interest because this is a retro channel. A lot of my viewers are more mature, don't really connect with modern films. So I just do a roundup at the end of the month where I talk about all the films I've seen. And as I said, that often includes physical media, classic films, downloads, and modern films and so on. But I did think that The Long Walk deserved its own little piece, which is why I've done it. So like and subscribe. You can do it by clicking that. You can click that. I will see you soon for more traditional stuff. But until I do, keep taking the stuff.